Many entrepreneurs live frantic, haphazard, scattered lives. They own their own business or they're self-employed, but they're not even in charge of their own calendar or their schedule or their life. Not really. They end up spending more time being reactive rather than proactive, just putting out fires or working on the project du jour or whatever that day happened to demand of them. And yet the most successful people that I know are disciplined and they're focused and they have intentional habits that set them up for the success that they want in their life and their leadership. And so in this episode, that's what we're going to talk about, how you can develop the habits that you need to have to be successful, how you can build good ones and how you can cut the bad ones, how you can build intentional effort toward the kind of life and the kind of business that you want to have. Welcome to another episode of the Shift Podcast. I'm Matt Ware with my co-host Evan Weiland. We're at the Uva Wine Bar in North Colorado Springs, and we are so excited to talk about this topic of habits because this is such a huge thing that impacts our lives that sometimes we don't give a lot of thought and attention to. These habits are happening sort of, in the background. Maybe they're even white noise. They kind of happen on autopilot. We're not even always conscious of them or thinking of them. And yet we know that habits are shaping and forming our lives, maybe more than we realize, more than we wish they were. And we need to pay some attention to this. This is a huge topic. There's a lot of things we can talk about with habits and a lot of places we could start. But why don't we do this? Why don't we start with maybe the dark side, kind of the bad side of habits, because whether we want to admit it or not, we've all got some bad ones.
Yeah. So you might be thinking, I need to form some habits. And you probably already have. They're just bad habits.
Right. Not the ones you want.
Not the ones you want. And so success in business is really going to come down to not just forming good habits, but throwing out, recognizing and trashing the bad habits that sabotage your growth. Unfortunately, in my experience, entrepreneurs, including myself here, we unknowingly create bad habits that set us back.
Yeah.
And so we've went ahead and done the favor of creating a list of 3 that you probably resonate with. And so Matt, let's kick them off here. Number 1 is procrastination. Procrastination, right? Yeah. We've heard this since we were writing essays in school.
Right.
All right. The night before, we've all been there. Number 2 is perfectionism. We all know we've all felt this, right?
Right.
Thinking that it has to be perfect before we can move on or submit it. And number 3 is avoidance. So these are the 3 really bad habits that I think we can begin with.
Yeah. And I think, I don't even like hearing you talk about them because I think if I'm being honest, like I've got all of these in varying degrees and different times. Yeah. And if you're watching or listening and you're even halfway self-aware or honest with yourself, you would have to admit you have some of these sometimes as well, right? Like I think these are very common, like you said, bad habits that entrepreneurs, business owners, leaders can develop. So the question is, what do we do about it?
Yeah, that's the question. What are we going to do about it, right? One of the most common exercises around habits is something they call the habit swap. And it's just like it sounds. You take a bad habit and you swap it out for a good one.
Right.
And this is genius. I think the reason that it works so well for our nature is because nature abhors a vacuum. That space is going to have to be filled with something.
Right.
And so you might as well compound it. Take something that you're doing that's not good for you, it doesn't serve you, and replace it with something that's good. An example could be like from our list, avoidance, right?
Right.
As an entrepreneur, man, it's so easy for me to avoid things that I need to go do.
Yep.
And we talk about this. As an entrepreneur, you can't afford to avoid the things that you have to get done.
Right. Yep.
Right? You are the captain and the CEO and everything else. So every time that I feel like avoiding making phone calls, right? Whether it's sales calls or dealing with the bank, heaven forbid. Every time I can really feel that I want to avoid that. And you can measure that in time. You can say, you know what, I don't feel like it. And you've put it off for 10 minutes.
Right.
And you put it off for 15 minutes. And just say to yourself, you know what? Make this easier for myself. I don't have to pick up the phone now, but I'm going to put it on the calendar. I'm going to pick up the phone in 15 minutes, right? And when that timer goes off, I will do that. And I think what you're doing is you're swapping out avoidance for taking action. And I think if you Now, if you play that out over a 30-day period, I think you're going to make gains.
Well, and to your point, you're also combating procrastination as well. An example that's simple, you're actually knocking out a couple of bad habits and replacing them with good ones, which I think that's another interesting idea with the habit swap. Is it's sort of a double win, right? Because if you just stop the bad habit, then you go back to neutral.
Yeah, I like that.
But
But
if you replace it with a good one, then you haven't just gone back to neutral, you've gone forward, right? And so I think if there's areas where we say, I know I've got this bad habit that I can identify, if I can swap in a good one, I'm really making double the gain in that area.
Absolutely. So we spent quite a bit of time talking about the dark side of habits, right? We could talk about this all day. We could probably write a book on it. Some people have
Right.
wrote books on this stuff. So let's spend the next 10, 15 minutes getting into the light side, right?
Right. The better side.
Building the better side.
Yeah. So one of the most influential books that's been written about this topic, about habits, at least in the last few years, is Atomic Habits by James Clear. And Evan's handing it to me now.
Just had it in my back pocket the whole time.
It's pocket size. Atomic Habits by James Clear. Probably if you're listening or watching, you've heard of this book. I was very familiar with it, but actually just at the beginning of this year, finally sat down and read it for myself. And man, what a great book. Can't recommend it highly enough. One of the big, I think, sort of breakthrough concepts that he introduces in this book is the idea of outsourcing your habits. And I know that sounds counterintuitive because you think, well, how can I outsource my habits? Like I can't have somebody else do my push-ups for me, right?
Up
like
to me.
Yeah, like don't I have to own this for myself? And his point is that your environment shapes your habits so much. Your environment either makes it conducive to building a good habit or makes it really difficult or it makes it easy to continue the bad habits, that if you'll get intentional about building the right environment, you are, in a sense, outsourcing habit formation to the environment itself. And I think this is a really sort of, again, just like a breakthrough concept because I had never thought about it that way, although I know intuitively that that's true, right? It's easier to do some of the things I want to do in certain environments than it is in other environments. And of course, harder in some than others. And, one of the statements, even if you hadn't read the book, one of the statements maybe you've heard from James Clear, probably his most famous statement from the book, is that you do not rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your systems.
Nice.
And your systems, I mean, that's the patchwork, that's the network of your habits. And we know that that's true, right? Like I have all these aspirations and dreams and goals. I don't automatically rise to those. I tend to level out at wherever my habits really are, wherever that system is in my life. And so if I can create a better system of habits, then I can begin to change the trajectory that I'm on, whether that's a personal or professional thing. And what he does is he emphasizes the idea that if you begin to design your surroundings in such a way that's conducive to these good habits you want to form, what you're doing is you're reducing your reliance on willpower.
Right.
And I think that's such an important thing because willpower is good to get started, but it's not good to keep going, not over the long haul. Willpower always wanes over the long haul. And so we have to create an environment that makes these desired behaviors, these good habits, more automatic in some ways, more just kind of natural for us. He suggests that our environment is the invisible hand that shapes human behavior.
Nice.
And I think that's a good way of saying it because, if you buy into that concept, you can really outsource habit formation to the environment. One example, that comes to mind where we see this play out would be with somebody, goes to rehab for substance abuse issues, right? We all know, like a lot of people are able to kick the addiction when they're in the rehab center. We also know that the recidivism rate when they get out of rehab is really, really high. Yep. And the reason is because they were in an environment that was really easy for them to make the right choice. And now they came back into an environment where it's easy to make the bad choice. In some cases, back to the environment that got them in trouble in the first place. And so this idea of building an environment that really is conducive to the kind of habits you want to have is so powerful. And ultimately to understand that your environment is going to have more influence on your habit than your willpower.
Yeah. Well, I think a lot of us understand this intuitively, at least on some level, that you should outsource to your environment or that your environment has a big impact on the outcome, like the example, right? Going to rehab. If you struggle with alcoholism, you probably shouldn't hang out at bars.
Right.
I mean, we know this intuitively, right? To a degree. So there's another great book called Willpower Doesn't Work by Benjamin Hardy. So to your point, willpower is such a weak way to build good habits. It goes against our human nature, right? The easy path, the fun path, whatever it may be.
Yep.
It's not going to work well. It's important to make the process frictionless. So when you do outsource to your surroundings, to your environment, you're making it frictionless. You're making it easier to do the good habit and making it hard to do the bad habit.
Right.
An example I want to give is an old pastor friend that I had probably 15 years ago. And he played basketball in college. And when you're around him, you can just sense that he's an athlete. He just has that sort of drive, that athleticism to him. And he decided he needed to lose weight. And so part of his regimen was going running every morning. And he explains the story. He says, my routine is simple. I get up, I get dressed, I get my coffee, and I go on a run. And he said something that he does to make sure that he actually goes on a run, he'll wake up, he'll start having that voice in his head telling him like, yeah, just skip a day. Or,
Right.
It's
cold outside.
Yeah, it's cold outside. And what he does is he goes ahead and puts on his running outfit, right? He puts on his shorts, his shoes, his tennis shoes, still not fully committed
Right.
to going on the run. He's
dressed for the part.
He's dressed for the part. Yeah. He's outsourcing to his environment.
Yeah.
And he said he never skipped a run day.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And right now you and I are in the middle of the 75 hard challenge, with some other buddies. And so we're seeing this too, right? Like this is part of the 75 hard challenge it's not just a physical thing or a mental thing or whatever. It's developing the habits, right? It's the habit formation.
Right.
And, I think one of the most challenging of all of the pieces of the program is drinking a gallon of water every day. I don't want to say that I wasn't drinking a lot of water. It was just usually filtered through coffee grounds. And so, so drinking a gallon of water, that has been like that was a hard thing to form the habit. So I knew if I were going to just sort of, go through it in a haphazard way, I'd never be able to do it. I would never drink the gallon. I would never be able to track it correctly, all of that. So what I did is I bought myself a new Yeti water bottle, which happens to be sitting right here. Which, by the way, if anyone is watching or listening and you're from Yeti and would like to sponsor us, let us know.
Please.
But what I did is I found the bottle that had the right number of ounces that I could fill it up a specific number of times, so that I would hit the goal, right? So this one's 26 ounces. So I knew if I filled it 5 times, that's 130 ounces. It takes 128, to hit the gallon. So in my mind, I'm like, okay, the only way that I have a shot at drinking a gallon of water is if I've got a system, right? Because I'm not going to rise to the level of my goal. I'm going to fall to the level of my system. My system has to be that I fill up this bad boy 5 times a day. And that's how I know if I'm staying on track. So in some ways, as simple as that sounds, like I've almost outsourced my gallon of water intake goal to this 26 ounce Yeti bottle that I know if I get through it 5 times a day, I've accomplished the goal.
Yeah.
And that seems like a silly example, but that really is that's what we're talking about, right? It's things that are broken down into such a granular level that as long as you do those things, you're going to make the progress that you want.
Yeah. And it is simple though. It is simple that you've outsourced it to the water bottle. It's now frictionless.
Right.
It shouldn't have to be complicated. Right. It should be a simple system. I used to, when we first started with the challenge, I used to chug 8 16-ounce cups of water a day. And it's kind of brutal. But I would forget. I would go 3 hours without drinking water. And now I'm chugging 2 16-ounce cups of water to catch up. And so now I tote around this, I think it's 64-ounce, almost call it a jar, 64-ounce jar of water with me. But I sit that thing on the table. If I'm working remote or working at home, whatever I do, it's sitting right there. It's the same thing. I've just outsourced it to this jug of water. And even better, mine has lines that tells me the progress. So I've outsourced, now I've outsourced the level of my intake to the jar as well.
Right.
Okay, so let's go deeper, right? So we spent some time talking about swapping out destructive habits with good ones, and using our environment to do that. So what's the next step to building lasting habits?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. And I actually love the framework that James Clear lays out in Atomic Habits for how to build the habits that you want. And he has 4 simple keys. Number 1, make it obvious. Number 2, make it attractive.
Okay.
Number 3, make it easy. And number 4, make it satisfying. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Make it obvious, make it attractive, make it easy, make it satisfying. And by the way, if you want to kill a bad habit, you just do the opposite of those things, right? You make it invisible, make it unattractive, make it difficult, and make it unsatisfying.
Yeah, this is good.
So, there you go. There's the Cliff Notes version of the book. But let's focus on those good habits, right? So make it obvious. Our water bottles actually are the perfect example of this, right? When I see the water bottle sitting on the counter, that is making it obvious that I need to drink the water, right? It stares me in the face saying, you need to take a drink now, right? Like you're never going to get 128 ounces in unless you stay on top of this. So that water bottle sitting on the counter is what makes it obvious, which is what makes the habit work, right? Number 2, make it attractive. One of the things that we did to make it attractive is we recruited some other guys to do it with us. And so we've built a support system. We've got a group chat. We do a weekly Zoom call to check in and all of that. And so it has become more attractive to do these habits in the 75 Hard Challenge because we have a cohort that we're doing it with. And by the way, there's accountability in that too. It's not just attractive to do it, but there's a little bit of like skin in the game because you don't want to let other people down, right?
Yep.
The third one is to make it easy. And this is an interesting one and something that I really have found to be true, particularly with the 75 Hard Challenge. To make it easy, I think means in a lot of ways, you have to break the habit down into the smallest thing that moves you in the right direction. The least amount of effort that it takes to stay on the right trajectory. And, part of the challenge is, we do 2 workouts a day and one of them has to be outdoors. A lot of times both of them end up being outdoors, but we have to do 2 workouts a day. And some days, depending on energy level, depending on how much time we have and all the other factors, some days that workout is just going for a brisk walk in the evening. Right. And so, on the outside looking in, if you're some diehard fitness, dude, whatever, like, well, a walk doesn't count, which by the way, actually the cardiovascular benefits of walking are really good. But that notwithstanding, it's the fact that not everything in your habit has to be this intense, like really difficult, strenuous thing.
Right.
Just taking the walk is continuing the habit. It's building the habit. It's what James Clear would say is this is a vote for the kind of person I want to be. Nice. Every action is a vote for the kind of person that I'm becoming. And in this case, the good habits are the kind of person I want to be. So make it easy in the sense of breaking it down to the lowest thing, the smallest amount of effort to keep it moving. And so the fourth thing is make it satisfying. One of the things that is very satisfying with the 75 Hard Challenge is we have this app, you check off all the things that you've done, that count toward the challenge every day. And who doesn't love a good check mark, on a to-do list item? Yeah. And then at the end of the day, you check it all off and you download the card, it said you completed day, whatever it is. And so, in the short run, that's a very satisfying thing.
Right.
Checking the boxes and then getting a card. In the short run, that's satisfying. In the longer run, I'm starting to see now physical changes, right? Like one of the things I did was cut out sugar and I've started to lose a little bit of weight and lose a little bit of body fat. And I feel like I look a little better and I feel a little better. And so all of those are things that are satisfying in a way that keeps me committed to the habit.
Yeah. I think folks, including myself, fail to build good habits because they start too big, too fast, and with too much pressure, right?
Yeah.
It's the example of the 2 workouts a day.
Right.
Like if you tell yourself that you have to go to the gym and do a HIIT workout twice a day, it's going to make it way more. It's very little chance that you're going to actually pull that off. Right. Okay.
Yep.
I think the key to forming a good habit isn't with that intensity, but it's going to be with the consistency.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and what we know is that consistency always trumps intensity.
Mhm.
Over the long haul, consistency always trumps intensity. And that's in anything in life. That's in fitness, that's in diet, that's in business, that's in anything you do. You can come out of the gate hard and fast, but you're not going to be able to sustain that over a long period of time.
Mhm.
And that's why in the big picture, consistency is always going to beat intensity.
Yeah. Yeah. There's the 1% improvement method, right?
Right.
And you can see the actual math that backs this up.
Right.
It's called Kaizen in Japanese. But the 1% improvement method suggests that 1% improvement each day is going to be a 34.8% improvement over 30 days.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because James Clear actually talks about that in Atomic Habits, only he plays it out on a further time horizon. He talks about 1% improvement a day. If you were to do that for a year, actually results in a 37x improvement ratio.
Wow.
So when you think like, how could I be 37 times better than I am today? Just get 1% better every day.
Yeah.
Now, I realize in some ways, there's some areas of life that's hard to quantify, right? Like, I don't know what 37x better looks like in certain areas, but it's this concept of, I don't have to go from 0 to 100 tomorrow.
Right.
I've just got to get a little bit better every day.
Right.
I've got to get a little bit better in the things that I'm doing and just have an eye for consistent and continual improvement, for incremental progress in what I'm doing. And what we know is that consistency compounds.
Right, exactly.
And that's in anything in life, right? Consistency compounds. That's whether it's personal stuff or professional stuff. I mean, think about, you put money away for retirement.
Yep.
You can put a relatively small amount away if you start when you're 18 and you're adding just a little bit every month. Well, by the time you get to retirement age, you'll be a multimillionaire, right? And that's not because of the amount of money itself. It's because the consistency is compounding over time. And so for better or worse, consistency always compounds. And I say for better or worse because I think when we talk about habit formation, we should look at both sides of that, right? Your consistency, let's take diet as an example. Okay. Your consistency to be just, a small amount of cardiovascular exercise or a small amount of calorie deficit over a period of time is going to result in markedly improved health, weight loss, etc. On the other hand, if you overeat by just a couple hundred calories, but you do it every day for months at a time, you get to the end of the year and you've gained a lot of weight, right? And it's not because of the one meal, the one cookie, the one bowl of ice cream. It's because the consistency of doing it every day after day after day is what compounds over time. So when it comes to habit formation, we've just got to realize our consistency is going to compound for better or for worse.
That's right. Yeah. And, if there are entrepreneurs listening, they might be thinking, okay, I've got a list of habits that I want to get rid of. I got a list of habits that I want to swap out. But personal or professional, Matt, where do you think that they should start?
Yeah, well, I think it's important to say that both matter. Both personal and professional habits matter.
Yep.
I want to start with the personal, and the reason why is because I would say that if your personal life is not in order, your professional life will not be in order either, or at least it won't be for very long.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
And I've experienced this. I don't know, maybe you have too. I know a lot of business owners have. It's really easy, because we love what we do and we're passionate about it. We've got this dream, this vision that we're pursuing, and we go all in on it. And I think often overemphasize our professional life,
right, and
maybe underemphasize personal life, which you can do for a short period of time, but you can't do it for very long without that biting you in the butt. That will catch up to you. And I would say if you're watching or listening and right now you are in a prolonged season of overemphasizing the professional over the personal, I would just highly challenge you to realize that is a short-sighted strategy, that will not end well. Let me put it that way. If you don't get that in check, if you don't get that in balance, your business will suffer, your professional life will suffer if your personal life isn't in order. So I say start with personal, and here are a few areas. And these aren't specific habits. These would just be areas that I think are worth giving some thought and attention to when it comes to your habit formation. One would be, your physical habits, right? Your sleep, your nutrition, your fitness. The older I get, the more important those things are to me, because I realize that if my body is not in optimal condition, my business is not going to be in optimal condition either. If I'm always tired, if I'm sluggish, if I'm sick, out of shape, any of those things, that actually affects my business. Your emotional life. I think the bonus episode that we did with Dr. Alok Singh not long ago, he talked about this, how important the emotional life of a leader, of an entrepreneur really is. You can't have a healthy, thriving business if you don't have healthy emotional life. And so giving attention to that matters. Spiritual life, we're people of faith. So we would say, prayer and reading the scriptures and being a part of a church, a faith community, all of those things matter. And even if you're not, a Christian or you're not a person of faith, I think you would still recognize that your spiritual life is a component of your overall life, and it needs attention. You've got to pay attention to it and form good habits around it. And of course, your mental life, which as a leader is huge, right? Are you learning? Are you growing? Are you reading and listening and all those things to build those good habits?
Yeah. I mean, for my family and I, we have habits that really drive the direction of the Wylands. And for us, the spiritual habit really is the lead domino.
Sure.
For all the other three that you just mentioned here.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think, if you're watching or listening, I would say start there, right? Start with your personal life, and your professional life is going to build on the foundation of your personal life. And so getting that right matters. But let's move into some of the professional things. And these would be some things that, again, this is not prescriptive. I know people are in different places, and these aren't specific things. Well, maybe some of them are, but I think they speak to these bigger issues that can sometimes trip us up in your professional life. One is, I would say, develop the habit of getting control of your schedule, being in charge of your calendar, time blocking, having themes for your day or your week, avoiding, task switching as much as you can, ruthlessly guarding your calendar, whether that's with a VA or with some kind of a software or whatever it is. That may be the most important habit that I encourage my clients to develop. Because if you don't control your calendar, you don't control your life, and you don't control your business, period. Another one that I think is super important is prompt communication.
Okay.
And I don't just mean that like in a customer service kind of environment. I'm talking about just in general, your mental bandwidth will be so much freer if you just take care of things quickly. Phone calls and emails and texts and DMs and all those kind of things.
Dump the RAM.
Yeah, right. Exactly. And by the way, from a business standpoint, that is a big key to getting and keeping your clients, by the way, is prompt communication. And a second piece of that, maybe it's a sub point, is get in the habit of closing the loop.
Okay.
Closing the loop. I think too many of us live with too many open loops. Those are the unanswered texts and emails, the unreturned phone calls, the meeting with no clear action plan that came out of it, discussions without decisions. Years ago, I heard someone say this. They said, every meeting should end by everyone in the room being able to answer this question: who does what by when? If you can't answer the question, who does what by when, you either shouldn't have had the meeting because it was a waste of time, or the meeting's not over yet because you got to figure that out, right? Who does what by when? So that's closing the loop on things. Another habit that I would encourage business owners and leaders to really intentionally build is to confront issues. Confront the things that are going to cause problems, right? There's a saying in the therapy world that the faster you deal, the faster you heal. And I think that's not just true, in a therapeutic sense. That's true in the business sense. Like, there's so many things that we hope will go away, sweep them under the rug. And I promise you, time is not your best friend when it comes to these things. Time makes it worse. It's going to blow up.
Not heal in those cases.
No, time does not heal in business. That's for sure. And so the faster you can deal with the problem, especially if it's a person problem, the better, right? Because delaying it is only going to amplify it. And then the last one, I would say, develop the habit of good decision making. And you've got to decide what that is for you and for your context. And honestly, we could do a whole episode on this, and maybe we will at some point, because decision fatigue is a real thing for leaders and business owners. So deciding when you'll decide, having designated decision days or times. We even do that, with the podcast production, right? Like, we have certain things on our calendar. It's like, this is when we need to decide certain things.
Right.
And I'm not going to think about it before that or after that, but in that meeting, that's when this decision happens, right? Deciding who will decide. Push as much decision-making down in your organization as possible so all the decisions aren't coming up to you. Decide what you'll decide. You can have whole categories. You say, I just don't decide this. This is what somebody else decides. For years, when I led a large organization, I had a standing rule that I don't decide what we eat at any meeting.
Nice.
If somebody's ordering in lunch, if there's a big event, if there's it doesn't matter what it is, someone else is going to decide, because I'm not going to waste any mental energy on what I'm eating. And I know that sounds silly, but that's an example of just saying, like, this is the habit that I'm going to form around decision making that frees up bandwidth for other things. So, and what I think is important to recognize about this list of things in terms of the professional habits that we're developing is that none of these require any special talent or skill. You don't have to have an education around this. You don't have to be some rock star. Anybody can do these things.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, and it also doesn't require an expensive software subscription, right?
Right. It just requires me saying, I'm going to develop a discipline. I'm going to develop a focus. I'm actually going to build habits that serve me well. You just have to decide, these are the habits that are going to allow me to live and lead at the level that I want to be at.
That's good. So, Matt, let's wrap up here. So, Matt, we just spent some time giving the audience lots of things to think about,
right,
as it pertains to habits. Let's recap. Okay. So, first of all, the 3 most common bad habits were procrastination, perfectionism, and avoidance. Avoidance was mine. That was not just an example.
It was Evan's confessional.
It was actually a confession. So, we've also talked about how important it is to outsource to your environment.
Yeah.
Environment is crucial to good habits. How to build new habits on top of that. And then we've talked about the areas of habits, which are both professional and personal.
Right.
Shameless consulting plug here. Matt and I deal with these things in our own businesses, but also we help other entrepreneurs in their businesses deal with these things: the procrastination, the perfectionism, the avoidance, the habits that they're trying to form, how to trash the old ones and how to form good ones. Yeah. We help them do that around people, product, process, these 3 areas within your business. So if this is something that resonates with you, that you feel you could get some professional help on, give us a shout. Our contact information is in the description below. Let's give them some resources, right?
Yeah,
so
that'd be great.
The books that we've talked about today are Atomic Habits by James Clear. We haven't talked about this one, but I want to give this to you. The Power of Habit by Charles Duhigg. I've read that. It's on my shelf.
Yep.
It's a red and white cover.
It kind of influences some of these other thoughts.
It sure does.
Yep.
It sure does. And then I mentioned Willpower Doesn't Work by Benjamin Hardy.
Yep.
It's a really great book. We're going to leave all that in the description below. Thanks so much for listening to this episode of the Shift Podcast. Hope you found it valuable. Be sure to like, share, subscribe, leave a comment below, and we hope to see you guys on the next one.